It's my pleasure to welcome you here to the Clark Howard Show, where our mission is to serve you with advice and information that empowers you to make better financial decisions in your life. You know, it's Friday, and that means I get to hear where I may have gotten things wrong or worse in our Clark Steak segment. And also, coming up later, one of my favorite topics, drives you crazy, Christa? You know, my oldest brother, when I was young, called me the carry-out kid. Fast food restaurants.
You didn't know what food was unless it was in a bag, brown paper bag.
Or a TV dinner.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what a TV dinner was?
Yes, I used to. My mom used to serve me
Pre-microwave?
those. Yeah, Salisbury steak. I remember TV dinners.
Okay, so if you're under 40, you don't know what this was because you grew up your entire life in the era of microwaves. And there used to be these things that were in aluminum, and they were TV dinners, and you'd preheat the oven to whatever temperature, and they'd be in the oven for 30, 40 minutes. And then you'd have...
They had little compartments. So you'd have like your protein, and then it even had like a dessert, usually, like a brownie.
Nobody used the term protein back then, Christa.
Oh, yeah, whatever.
You got your meat, your starch, and your vegetable.
Right.
That's what they had.
And then your dessert. You had a dessert.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah. So there was a huge section, a frozen food section in the supermarket back in those days for these TV dinners. And families tended, I'm going in the Wayback Machine, families tended to have one TV in the living room, and they'd have these TV trays that you'd pop up when you were eating, and you'd sit in the chair and you'd watch TV eating your TV dinner.
Yeah.
That's why they were called TV dinners.
Okay.
Who needed to hear all that?
That's okay.
There should be a Clark Stinks about that.
I know.
Anyway, I digress. Can you imagine what I was like in school?
Squirrel.
Yeah, staring out the window all the time. Man.
So anyway, back to that. The reason you were saying that is because you loved fast food. And that is, you're talking about fast food restaurants later on.
Yeah, all right.
After we get to
Clark Stinks, where you get to hear where I gave bad advice, incomplete information, or I was just plain dumb.
I should have never encouraged you to speak.
You must think I'm pretty stupid.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe you're right, pal.
Clark discussed buying and selling gold and emphasized the gap between purchase and sales price. However, I believe his discussion of the tax on gold as a collectible with appreciated value would be helpful. John,
thank you very much. Gold and precious metals have a discriminatory tax placed on them under the tax code. Under the wisdom of the tax writers in the House, where they originally wrote this with the discriminatory tax on collectibles, gold is considered to be a collectible because it doesn't create, other than a small amount of gold being used for jewelry, is not used in creating productive capacity, which is the whole reason we have capital gains tax, is a lower tax than what you pay on money you earn at a job. Gold does not, just kind of sits there. It doesn't create greater wealth for society, and it is a hedge against other things. So most often, gold, whether it's held as physical gold or held in an ETF or an ETN, exchange traded note, exchange traded fund, you will have a discriminatory tax rate of 28% on your gain. That's the ceiling on it typically, where on stock holdings, generally the cap is around 20%. And for many people, it will be 10 or even 0 on gains on a stock potentially. But that is a point I should have made, John, and I apologize for forgetting to talk about the much higher tax you have on it. And while we're on the gold thing, there are a lot of people, we talked about it on the show recently, that are buying too much gold as a percent of their assets because the value of gold has gone up so much. Really, you want to have a cap on how much of your investments are in gold or precious metals. Somewhere 3 to 5% is what most financial experts would say.
Clark, you stink like a truck driven by a current Southwest Airlines executive carrying the Atlanta Falcons football team parked at the headquarters of Zell.
This is definitely a regular listener or viewer. This is awesome.
Not really. I just wanted to be elaborate. You were telling a listener that cashback rewards cards are almost always preferable to travel rewards cards. What you forgot to mention is that if you have cards with Chase or Citi, you can redeem your points for cashback at 1 cent per point and or transfer them to partner airlines and hotels at rates often higher than a cent per point. Of course, this is contingent on having either company's $95 annual fee travel card. This way, they can get the benefits of a travel card like trip interruption and baggage delay insurance while still retaining the ability to get cash back. And there's another one about this same scenario, the same thing that you said. Mr. Clark, you smell like my old sneakers after a rainstorm left out to dry on the porch. A listener asked you about whether rewards or cashback cards would be better, and you incorrectly stated points are worth almost at most 0.7 of a dollar. While this can be true for some redemptions, looking at you, Hilton and Marriott, there are lots of great points and miles sweet spots that can give an average spender outsized value. I'm talking 3 to 4 cents per credit card point. While the points and miles game isn't for everyone, this can be a great way to minimize out-of-pocket travel costs for someone willing to do a little legwork to find the deals. There are lots of free tools and guides out there. My husband and I have saved thousands of dollars by leveraging credit card points, essentially using our everyday spending to pay for our significantly subsidize our trips. I've even gotten my retired parents into the game. You should look into it, Clark. It's a great way to spend less and stretch your dollar without compromising the quality of your travel. Christina.
Christina, thank you very much. So when I was talking about the 0.7 of a cent, I was specifically referring to who you did to Marriott.
That was the previous. Did she say that? Yes.
Said,
I'm sorry. It was Christina, and then Patrick sent the other one in. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, okay. The 0.7 of a cent per dollar. So, all right. So you're both onto something that I actually covered on a podcast and YouTube show months ago, and that is why going independent on travel cards is where the sweet spot is now, with the Chase Sapphire Reserve or Preferred, the Capital One Venture X, or the American Express Platinum. These 3 cards all have there's 3 providers, have annual fees from $95 to the American Express, which is around $700, I think, for annual fee. So you got to be a very heavy traveler to go the Amex route. But these allow you to leverage different offerings where you can transfer points to particular vendors. I mentioned how I had used this as a way to transfer points for Hyatt stays, because Hyatt stays tend to be much more rewarding generally, although they're making changes with their program, than you're going to have with Hyatt or Marriott or International Hotel Group. That transferring points makes you that free agent. And I've used it many times with International Airlines to do really great mileage redemptions by transferring from one of these free agent kind of cards that I greatly prefer to captive cards, where you're captive of a particular airline or hotel chain.
I think you missed some key points on the NordVPN scam response. For starters, she noted that the scammer said they can fix the charge by linking to the account for a refund. This means that they gave the scammer software full access to their account. In addition, the quote-unquote overpayment scam is a popular one. Eric.
So will you set the background?
It's someone received a call or they were trying to get in touch with their VPN, but really it wasn't their VPN. Like the person was calling them or contacting them, and wanted full access to their account. So this person actually they signed into their account and gave them access to their account. And that is a popular scam. Like you overpaid too much money.
So we need to refund it to you.
Yeah, we need to refund it to you. So they just felt like you left that part out, like what was actually going on. There is more than one reason to do a home remodel. I ran an Airbnb for many years, and I found it a nice way to supplement income. I've rented both the whole home and also a single room at different times, depending on whether I would reside at the home or find an excuse to take off somewhere and rent the whole house. I'm currently converting the upstairs single room space to a full mini apartment and plan on either staying there while I rent out the rest of the home, or rent both the home and the apartment separately, or rent both spaces together as a single stay. I'm a contractor, so this is all DIY. I understand your point that hiring out this work could get quite pricey, but if one is so inclined, creative, ambitious, and handy, it can be done. Mark.
Mark, thank you. And, I've had an obsession my whole adult life with having rental income from property. And I became a landlord the first time in, when I was in my 20s. And I love having rental units. A lot of places you can't do Airbnb anymore, but you can have a longer-term rental doing a conversion like you did. And the payback, taking existing square footage, even if it's not DIY like you can do, is really great when you're going to have a nice return on investment from renting a space out. It's much cheaper to adapt a space that already exists into an income-producing property at your property than it is to build or buy a full rental property from, just buying something from the get-go. That conversion is a great use of money to build income into your life, just like you're doing.
Mr. Howard.
Oh, man.
You really missed the mark when discussing Americans' retirement and how you would fix 401ks. We need to discuss how Social Security should be controlled by us and not the government. I am all for forced investing, and we could set it up like the TSP for options. If someone only makes $50K per year from 20 to 65 and never makes above that, they would have $4.5 million in retirement with the 12.5% from Social Security, making an average of 10% return. That's real money, and people could pass that down from generation to generation. Right now, if you die at 61, well, sorry, family, we keep your money. Shawn.
Shawn, thank you very much for this. And I direct you back in the Wayback Machine. About 20 years ago, President Bush, George W., came up with a plan to do almost exactly what you're referring to, that there would be two components to Social Security. There would be one that was the current Social Security type check, and the second would be investing through an account like the TSP under the administration of Social Security, so it would have very, very low administrative costs. And it went nowhere. Elected officials of both political parties were just totally opposed to it. But we need simplicity and universality so that people, regardless of where they work, what they do, have access to easy to understand, affordable investment options that stay portable with them instead of this crazy haphazard system we have where roughly half of Americans have no access to a retirement plan where they work. And simplicity is key, and that it's available to everybody, not just the privileged, is what we need to be doing. And your idea is just fine, and it's the kind of thinking we need to do. We need to clean sheet how we think about retirement.
A couple of people wrote in about this one. You made a reference to United Airlines, quote unquote, beating up that doctor when he would not leave the plane. It is alleged that the airline asked for volunteers for additional compensation, and the doctor agreed. But when he found out no more flights were going that day, he ran back on the plane and resisted when being removed. Had he not resisted, he would not have gotten hurt. It's not his plane, Clark, and he should have deplaned when he was asked and take them to court if he felt like they were in the wrong. When he refused to vacate, United should have deplaned the flight, and if he still refused to leave, they could have had him arrested. Still, he should have deplaned on his own when asked, and then he wouldn't have gotten hurt. Robert,
okay. The versions I keep hearing about this, when we've all seen video of what happened to the doctor, United changed its entire procedures about how they handle an overbooked. And the rule's pretty clear. When somebody's already on a plane in their seat, unless they're a non-rev passenger, an airline employee flying for free, or a family member of an airline employee flying for free, then they've got to get off the plane if a paying passenger with a reservation needs to be accommodated. What happened in this case was bad, ugly, and to blame the victim in this case is just flat out wrong. United blew it. They're a better airline because of all the negative publicity. They changed their procedures, and every other airline also has very clear procedures. They never end up in a position like this where they're beating up a passenger, dragging them off an airplane, injuring that person. So yeah, you wrote Clark Stinks about me complaining about United beating up that passenger, that doctor. And let me tell you, they did. Airlines have a lot of latitude in who sits in their seats, who flies on their airline. They have permanent no-fly lists and all that, where they decide a passenger is a problem, and in many cases justified, and ban them permanently. Airlines have so much power, but physically beating somebody up and removing them off an airplane, just watch the video, not okay. Not okay. Coming up ahead, I'll tell you something a lot of people don't think is okay, that I consume so much fast food. What am I doing? Well, actually, this pod's not about that. It's about something else we're going to talk about straight ahead. We're all guilty of something economists call static analysis. We see things as they are in our lives or in society or whatever, and all our frame of reference for how we think about them is based on how they are at that moment. But that's not how the free market works. And restaurants, from fast food to quick serve to traditional sit-down restaurants, are all having to adapt to terribly difficult market conditions. Why have so many restaurant chains and individually owned restaurants failed in the last 2 years? Because it's been brutal to be a restaurant owner and to be a restaurant customer, because the cost of food, as we know when we go to the supermarket, has gone up so much. The cost of labor for restaurants gone through the roof. And then the cost of leases, the rent that restaurants have to pay, so gross ugly. Then you add on top of it food delivery, which became such a thing during COVID, has, even though it's declined in market share, it's still a thing. And if I own a restaurant and I'm doing cooperation with the food delivery services, they're killing me with a big chunk I've got to pay them that may make that a losing proposition for me. In other words, being a restaurant owner is really, really hard right now. So I look at what restaurateurs are doing from every level as a great example that all of us understand, because we've all eaten out, that the thing about business and about life is adapting, not sitting there with your blinders on and continuing doing things as you were. And what do I mean adapting? Restaurants are building smaller spaces. They're going to variable pricing. They're using all kinds of new labor enhancing tools. In other words, automation, productivity at all different kinds of restaurants. Look at how restaurants have become more efficient at even something as simple in a sit-down restaurant as how they present the bill. Think about more moderately priced sit-down restaurants that have had to modify how they do table service. You may have experienced this where somebody used to come and take your order. Instead, you place your order either on your phone at the table or you go up to a counter and place your order, and then a runner brings your drinks, brings your food, brings refills, whatever. I mean, this is the thing that we adapt, we change, we morph how we do things. And that's how business operates. And if you don't adapt, think about retail. How many retailers have closed in the last year? A lot, right? And restaurants. You turn right where so-and-so used to be. How many of us do something like that? It was a restaurant that was there a long, long time, and they didn't change as times required. They didn't adapt, and they ceased to exist. I think about the controversies involving California adopting the minimum wage for fast food workers. I think it's $20 an hour. And there were all these predictions about how fast food restaurants would cease to exist in California. It would be impossible for them to stay in business. How did they adapt? Well, last time I visited my daughter in Los Angeles, and we went to a regional fast food place near her home, her apartment. We walked in, and it used to be a place you went up to a counter to order food. Now you order it from a computer terminal, with a screen. You go into any McDonald's that's been renovated recently. When you order, it's almost impossible to order from a human. You order from a touch screen. Labor saving, innovation. And in the kitchen, that's where so much innovation is taking place. I just use this as an example because this is how all free market works, is adaptation. Why is it that the United States manufactures more goods than it ever has? Because of automation. 9% of Americans work in manufacturing, and that 9% produce more goods than we did when roughly 40% of Americans worked in manufacturing. Technology, adaptation, automation is what makes things improve over time, quality, the price, the rest. I'm ready for the Clark stinks on that, Christa.
Okay. Sharon in Georgia says, when is it okay to let go of comprehensive and or collision coverage with your car insurance?
So I love what you're asking, Sharon, because you're talking about the other things other than liability. I find that most people have excessive coverage potentially for collision and comprehensive, particularly with an older vehicle, but don't have enough liability coverage to protect the assets they have. So my general rule, and it's just mine, there are different formulas, when the value of your vehicle has dropped to the point where the annual cost of collision and comprehensive exceeds 10% of the remaining value of the vehicle, you dump that coverage and you become your own insurance company for damage that occurs to your car. And why do I say that? Because, all right, think back, Sharon, in your driving lifetime, how many accidents have you been in? So if you're like most people, not that many. So the 10% rule kind of works, is like 1 in 10 chance you're going to be in a wreck in, a period of time. And if, on the other hand, you drop your collision comprehensive because you have a much older vehicle, and then you have a wreck the next week, who you hating? Me.
All right, and we do have an article, a very extensive article about that at Clark.com. Elizabeth in Missouri says, I gave Zenni a fantastic review several years ago. My RX had changed, so I wanted to get a regular and sunglasses, and I went to Zenni since I had such a good experience. I ordered my glasses as usual and received lenses too small for the frames, giving a gap in the outside of each lens. I contacted Zenni, and they said this is common for some of the styles of frames, which is noted in the product reviews. I was so disappointed as I did not want a refund. I wanted the glasses I took the time to pick out and methodically entered in all the information. I guess I will go into a store from now on.
Okay, so one thing I can't tell from Elizabeth what you said is, did Zenni offer a refund, or did they say, well, you should have read the reviews?
Oh, no, I definitely think they did. She said, I didn't want a refund.
Okay.
So, but, I mean, that's crazy to say. Like, the reviews say it. Like, you should say it in your product's description.
Yeah, that's dumb. And Consumer Reports survey of where to get glasses, Zenni has actually fallen down the rankings a little bit. Zenni was way up high, is one of the best places in America to get glasses. We don't get a lot of complaints about them. They certainly are just about the cheapest anywhere to get glasses. But Consumer Reports, in its last review, said the best place to get glasses is?
I'm sure Costco Optical, because that's what Clark.com says. We have an article that's the best places to buy glasses online. And Costco and Warby Parker and Sam's Club are all above Zenni.
Okay.
And then we have some other online sites as well. So,
do you have any Zennis?
I don't. I got LASIK a while ago, so I just use like really, really cheap readers now because I have to have a million of them.
Clark, I don't need to know about that because I have perfect vision.
Well, I don't. Now I need readers, but I have to have them in every room because I lose them all the time, and I need them all the time now, unfortunately. So a great place to buy readers, by the way, I think, is like, you know, the chain that's owned Home Goods and Marshalls and TJ Maxx, or at least three of their. So Marshalls and TJ Maxx, I often find like 3-packs of readers that are really stylish, in my opinion, for like $10. So I feel like that's a pretty good deal. No,
so I don't
not
know
an endorsement.
I don't know if you know the LASIK story about my wife, but when Lane and I met, we've been married just short of 30 years. She was legally blind, and she needed
You always make
glasses.
jokes about that.
No, I mean, it's...
You used to always say she married me because she was legally blind.
Yeah. And then she got LASIK, and she said, I married you?
Okay. Sally.
You ruined the whole joke.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry. I didn't realize you were going for that. So, you want to do that over?
No,
Okay.
it's fine.
Sally in Ohio says, due in part to your advice, my husband and I currently have a net worth of between $3.5 and $4 million. We are in our low 60s.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we pay our credit cards monthly and have no debt. Our house is worth $325,000, while our 2025 truck and 2021 SUV are paid for. My husband likes his job and will probably work until he's between 65 and 70. Our house and car are insured with the USAA, and we have $1 million umbrella in policy, which costs $287 per year. Each additional million costs $144 per year. My question is, how much insurance, umbrella insurance, should we carry?
Okay, this is a great question because, Sally, you and your husband have a bullseye target on you if you end up being in a position where you end up potentially liable and somebody's hired one of those lawyers from the billboards and they come after you for everything you got. And so the danger is that here you got $4 million in assets that you built up over the years. Congratulations to the two of you. $1 million umbrella is not enough. What an umbrella is, if you're not familiar, it's an excess liability policy that sits on top of the liability coverage of your homeowners and auto. It's crazy cheap per $1 million because it's excess, and odds are that it will never, ever be needed. But if it is, you're really happy you have it. So having just $1 million with assets of $4 million is inadequate because you're in too much danger if there was something where a lawyer convinced a jury that you did something absolutely horrendous and they should issue this giant verdict. I mean, these happen. You see on the billboards, my lawyer got me $5 million, all that kind of thing. You want to, in my opinion, and USAA may have a different one, and they do this every day, I don't. I would say you want to add another $3 million on what you have so that you cover all your assets with liability coverage with your umbrella policy. For you, with the asset base you have, paying, that would be like $432 a year to add another $3 million in coverage. I think it's well worth it. And that's just my opinion, because you work too hard, you sacrifice so much, you lived on less than what you made for all those years to build up that much money as a net worth. I don't want it taken away in one instant from a jury verdict. I want to thank you so much for joining us this week. And I hope that you learned something this week on our podcast or YouTube show that really made a difference in your life. And, you know, today being Clark Stinks, you know why I love Clark Stinks so much? Because I'm just a guy. I'm one person. And I'll develop habits. I'll have blinders on from time to time like anybody else. And so having people bring in a different perspective that I may or may not agree with, but also bring information forward that I didn't know or missed the big picture of, I really appreciate it so very much. As we all are in this together, we all learn together. And so this weekend, hope you have an absolutely great, great time, whatever it is you're going to do this weekend. And know that I'll be back at your service on the podcast and YouTube show on Monday. And this weekend, you got a question, whatever you want to try to answer, we may have that answer about your wallet for you at Clark.com. You may find a deal on Clark Deals that you didn't know was out there that could save you money on something you're buying. So have a great one. Know everything we're about is you learning ways to save more, spend less, and avoid getting ripped off. See you next week.